I always thought my life was simple. Every evening I cooked dinner for my husband, Daniel. Our kitchen was small, our table even smaller, but I believed it was enough. The sound of beans simmering on the stove became the rhythm of my life. It was ordinary, quiet, and predictable. "Dinner's ready," I called out, my voice echoing through the narrow hallway. Daniel walked in, loosened his tie, and sat down with that same tired expression. I placed the plate of beans in front of him. He nodded, but his eyes didn't meet mine. "You work too hard," I said softly, trying to start a conversation. He gave a half smile. "Somebody has to." That was his answer to everything. Work, money, stress, always the same line. I tried not to take it personally, but deep inside I felt like a shadow in my own home. As I sat across from him, I noticed he barely touched the food. He scooped a spoonful of beans, chewed slowly, then pushed the plate away. "You don't like it?" I asked, forcing a laugh to hide my hurt. "It's fine," he muttered. "I'm just not that hungry tonight." Not hungry. He said that almost every night. And yet, the man I married used to eat like every meal was a celebration. I remembered our early days, how he would praise my cooking, how he would say, "Nobody makes beans like you, sweetheart." Now he just stared at the wall, distant and distracted. I tried again. "Do you want something else? Maybe some bread or—" "No, Claire. Stop fussing." His tone was sharp, final. I swallowed my words. A part of me wanted to argue, to demand why he had changed so much, but another part whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't push him away further." The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. I could hear the clock ticking, the faint hum of the refrigerator. My heart sank. After dinner, Daniel stood up quickly, grabbing his coat. "Where are you going?" "It's late," I asked. "Work," he replied without looking at me. "They need me for overtime." I frowned. "Again? You've been doing overtime almost every night this month." He turned his jaw tight. "Do you want me to quit my job? Is that what you want?" "No, my voice cracked. "I just miss you, that's all." For a moment his eyes softened. But just as quickly he looked away. "I'll be back late. Don't wait up." The door slammed, leaving me in silence once more. I sat back down at the table, staring at the untouched plate of beans. My beans. The meal I poured my love into every night. Cold and unwanted. I whispered to myself, "What's happening to us?" The house felt emptier with each passing day. I tried to convince myself it was stress, that Daniel was just working hard for our future. But deep inside, a shadow of doubt grew. That night, I washed the dishes slowly, my hands trembling in the soapy water. I remembered how my mother used to warn me, "Clara, watch the little things. A man doesn't leave his wife all at once. He leaves in pieces." Was Daniel leaving me in pieces? I shook the thought away, but it stayed haunting me. When I climbed into bed, the sheets felt cold. His side remained untouched. I stared at the ceiling, listening for the sound of his footsteps returning, but hours passed and he didn't come home. My chest tightened with a mixture of fear and anger. Where was he really going? Was he lying to me? The next morning, Daniel was already dressed for work when I woke up. He kissed my forehead quickly, too quickly, and rushed out the door. I sat at the table alone, staring at the leftover beans from last night. A bitter taste filled my mouth. I whispered, "Something's wrong, I can feel it." But I pushed the thought aside. I told myself marriage was about patience, about trust. I told myself to stop doubting him. And yet, my heart refused to believe my own lies. For the rest of the day, I replayed his words, his cold eyes, his disappearing appetite. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but I didn't. Instead, I cooked again, as if food could fix what was breaking between us. That evening, when he came home, I placed another plate of beans in front of him. He smiled faintly, forced. "Smells good." I searched his face, looking for the man I once knew, but all I saw was distance. As he picked at his food, I asked quietly, "Daniel, do you still love me?" The spoon froze in his hand. His eyes flicked up, startled, then narrowed. "Why would you ask something like that?" Tears burned my eyes, but I held them back. "Because you don't look at me the way you used to." He sighed, annoyed. "Clara, I'm tired. Please, just let me eat in peace." The words hit me harder than a slap. I nodded slowly, hiding my pain. Of course. We ate in silence, or rather I ate while he pretended to. He left early again with another excuse, another lie. And that night as I lay alone in bed, my heart whispered a truth I didn't want to face. My marriage was no longer ordinary. Something dark was brewing. The next few nights were no different. I cooked, he came home, he barely touched his food, and then he left again with another excuse. At first I tried to stay calm. He's just stressed, Clara. Don't imagine things. That's what I told myself. But the truth kept gnawing at me. One evening, after I spent nearly 2 hours stirring beans and seasoning them just right, I watched him from the corner of my eye. He scooped 2 spoons, chewed slowly, then set the fork down. That's it? I asked, forcing a smile. He glanced at me briefly. Yeah. I'm not that hungry. Daniel, you haven't been hungry for weeks, I said softly, careful not to sound accusing. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. I told you work is stressful. My stomach's not in the mood. Stop worrying. Stop worrying. Easy words for him, impossible for me. Later, when he got up to leave again, I noticed something strange. He didn't leave the half-full plate on the table like usual. Instead, he carefully scraped the beans into a container and tucked it inside a bag. My heart skipped. Why are you packing that? I asked. He froze, his back turned to me. Then he answered too quickly, I'll eat it later. At work. At work. I tilted my head. But you said you weren't hungry. He turned around sharply, his eyes cold. Clara, stop interrogating me. I said I'll eat it later. Isn't that enough? His tone pierced me like a knife. I nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in my throat. All right. But my heart whispered, he's lying. After he left, I stood in the empty kitchen, staring at the crumbs left on his plate. My hands shook. Why would he hide food from me? Why not just tell me the truth? The next night, I paid even closer attention. Again, he pushed the plate away after a few bites. Again, he scraped the beans into a container and slipped it into his bag. I didn't say anything this time. I just smiled and watched. But inside, my suspicion grew like wildfire. When I washed the dishes later, I pressed my forehead against the window, staring at the dark street outside. I whispered to myself, where are you taking my food, Daniel? The question echoed in my chest until I couldn't ignore it anymore. 2 nights later, I decided to test him. I cooked more than usual, an extra large pot of beans, enough for both of us and more. I wanted to see what he would do. As expected, he barely ate. He packed the rest carefully, almost nervously, and tucked it away. Don't stay out too late, I said sweetly, masking my suspicion. He kissed my cheek mechanically. I'll be fine. Don't wait up. The door clicked shut. I stood there in silence for a long time, staring at the empty hallway. Then my legs moved on their own. I grabbed my shawl, slipped on my shoes, and stepped outside. The night air was cold, biting my skin, but I didn't care. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. I kept my distance, following the faint sound of his footsteps down the block. Daniel walked quickly, glancing over his shoulder once or twice. I ducked behind parked cars, trees, anything I could find. The bag swung at his side and I knew what was inside. My beans. I whispered, God, please give me strength. Every step I took felt heavier than the last. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew it wouldn't be good. Finally, he turned a corner into a darker street I had never been on before. My body froze, hidden behind a lamppost, my breath caught in my throat. There, at the end of the street, I saw shadows. Figures. People. Daniel walked toward them slowly, his bag in hand. My blood ran cold. He set the bag down and one by one strangers stepped out of the darkness. Their clothes were torn, their faces tired. And yet, when Daniel opened the container, their eyes lit up. I covered my mouth, my knees trembling. He was giving them the beans. My beans. I wanted to scream, to run to him and demand answers, but my body wouldn't move. My chest was tight with a mix of anger, fear, and confusion. Why was he doing this in secret? Why not tell me? I gripped the lamppost for support, my mind spinning. In that moment, I realized my life was no longer mine. My husband had secrets that I was only beginning to uncover. And the truth was waiting for me in the shadows. The night I saw Daniel hand over the beans to strangers, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, my chest burning with unanswered questions. Why is he doing this behind my back? Why hide something like this from me? By dawn my decision was made. I would follow him again, closer this time. I needed to see everything with my own eyes, no matter how much it hurt. That evening I cooked like always. My hands moved mechanically, soaking, stirring, seasoning, while my mind screamed with doubts. Daniel sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, barely looking at me. "Here you go," I said, setting the plate down. He took a few small bites just like before. Then right on cue he scraped the rest into a container. My heart pounded, but I smiled as if nothing bothered me. "You're going out again?" I asked gently. He nodded. "Overtime. You know how it is." I forced a chuckle. "Don't work too hard." He gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, and just like that he was gone. The moment the door clicked shut, I grabbed my shawl, slipped into my shoes and followed. This time I stayed closer, my footsteps matching his. The night was quiet, the air sharp and cold. Every streetlight felt like an eye staring down at me, exposing my secret. My pulse hammered so loudly I was sure he would hear it. Daniel walked quickly, his bag swinging at his side. He turned left, then right, moving deeper into parts of town I'd never seen. I kept my distance, ducking into shadows whenever he glanced around. Finally, he stopped at an abandoned lot. Rusted fences surrounded the place and old bricks crumbled in the corners. My breath caught when I saw the figures gathering, men, women, even a child or two, all with tired faces and ragged clothes. Daniel knelt, opening the container. Steam rose into the cold night air, carrying the familiar smell of beans. "Here," he said softly. "Eat while it's warm." One by one they approached him. A man with a scruffy beard, a young girl holding a stuffed toy with no eyes, an older woman clutching a blanket too thin for the weather. They all looked at Daniel as if he were some kind of savior. "God bless you," the old woman whispered, her hands trembling as she took the food. Daniel smiled at her, an honest, warm smile I hadn't seen in years. My chest tightened. That smile used to be mine. I pressed my back against the wall, my hands shaking. My husband, the man who barely spoke to me at home, was here, pouring out kindness to strangers. My thoughts clashed violently. On one hand, what he was doing was good, noble even. But on the other hand, why lie to me? Why shut me out? I felt tears sting my eyes as I whispered, "Why, Daniel? Why couldn't you just tell me?" The young girl tugged at his sleeve. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Daniel ruffled her hair gently. "Of course. I'll bring more." The girl's smile was bright despite her hollow cheeks. I couldn't take it anymore. My knees almost gave out, but I forced myself to stay quiet. I didn't want him to know I was there. Not yet. I watched until the last spoonful was gone. Daniel packed up the empty container and said goodbye to them, promising he would return soon. When he turned to leave, I ducked behind a dumpster, holding my breath. He walked past me, not noticing, and headed back home. I waited until his footsteps disappeared, then I stepped out, staring at the spot where he had stood just minutes ago. The ground was littered with empty cups and paper scraps, but in that place I felt something else: betrayal. It wasn't the act itself. Feeding the homeless wasn't wrong. What cut me deeply was the secrecy, the lies, the wall he had built between us. I whispered into the night, "You don't trust me, do you?" The cold wind whipped around me, but the silence was louder than any answer. By the time I returned home, Daniel was already in bed, pretending to sleep. I stood in the doorway, staring at him in the dim light. His breathing was steady, calm, like a man with no guilt. I wanted to shake him awake, scream at him, demand answers. But the words died in my throat. Instead, I crawled into bed silently, lying as far from him as possible. I closed my eyes, but sleep never came. All I could see was his smile, the one he gave to strangers but not to me. The next morning, as I stirred coffee at the table, Daniel kissed my cheek lightly before rushing out the door. I stared at the steaming cup in front of me, my reflection trembling in the liquid. "I know your secret," I whispered to myself, "and I will find out why." For the first time in years, anger burned hotter than love in my chest. And I knew this was only the beginning. I couldn't hold it inside any longer. The secret was poisoning me, eating away at my chest like acid. That evening I cooked beans again just like every other night. The smell filled the kitchen, but instead of comfort it brought me rage. Every stir of the spoon reminded me of the lies he had told. Daniel came home late as usual. He loosened his tie, kissed my cheek half-heartedly and sat down. I placed the plate in front of him, my hands trembling. "Here you go," I said, my voice tight. He nodded. "Thanks." I sat across from him, staring. Watching. Waiting. He picked at the beans, took a few bites, then set the fork down. My chest burned. This time I didn't stay silent. "Why don't you ever finish your food anymore?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Daniel looked up, startled. "I told you, Clara. I'm not hungry." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "Not hungry? Or saving it?" He froze. For a moment his mask slipped. His hand tightened around the fork, his eyes flickering with something. Fear? Anger? Guilt? "I don't know what you mean," he muttered. "Yes you do," I snapped. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. "I followed you, Daniel." The words hung heavy in the air. His face paled. "What?" His voice was low, dangerous. "I saw you," I whispered, my throat tight. "I saw you carrying my beans to that empty lot. I saw you giving them to those people." Silence crashed between us. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. "You followed me?" His voice rose. "You spied on me?" I slammed my hand on the table, tears burning my eyes. "Don't turn this on me. You lied to me, Daniel. Night after night you lied. Do you think I'm blind? Do you think I don't notice you scraping food into that bag?" His chair screeched as he pushed back, standing tall over me. "You don't understand. Then make me understand." I cried. "Why hide it from me? Why sneak around in the dark like a thief?" Daniel's eyes flashed with anger. "Because you wouldn't get it, Clara. You never cared about them." The words cut deep, sharper than any knife. My voice cracked. "Them? You mean those strangers out there? You trust them more than me? You smile at them, talk to them, feed them, while at home you can't even look me in the eye." His lips pressed into a thin line. He looked away, his hands clenched into fists. I wiped my tears angrily. "Do you know how humiliating it feels to cook for you, to wait for you, only to realize you've been giving it all away behind my back? Not even telling me why? Do you have any idea how that feels?" Daniel finally looked at me, his face cold. "It feels like you're making this about you when it's not." My body went numb. "About me?" "Yes," he said harshly. "Those people out there, they have nothing. No roof, no food, no one. And you sit here worrying about your pride, about whether I compliment your beans. Do you even realize how selfish that sounds?" I stood, my voice breaking. "Selfish? Daniel, I am your wife. Your partner. You were supposed to share your life with me. Instead, you built another life in the shadows, one I was never part of. That's betrayal, Daniel. That's lying." He rubbed his temples, sighing. "I didn't mean for it to be like this." "Then why?" My voice cracked again. "Why couldn't you just tell me?" His answer came after a long pause. "Because you don't understand what it feels like to actually matter to someone." The words hit me like a slap. My knees buckled and I gripped the table for support. I whispered, barely audible, "I mattered to you once." For the first time I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, but it vanished quickly. He grabbed his coat. "Daniel, don't you dare walk away from me." I shouted, my voice raw. He turned, his face unreadable. "I can't do this right now." The door slammed behind him, rattling the walls. I collapsed into the chair, my whole body shaking. Tears poured down my face, dripping onto the cold wooden table. For years I thought silence held us together. That if I stayed patient, if I stayed loyal, things would be okay. But tonight I realized silence was the rope tightening around my neck. I whispered to the empty room, "You've already left me, haven't you?" And for the first time I admitted to myself. My marriage was crumbling and I didn't know if it could ever be saved. The house was unbearably quiet after Daniel stormed out. Every tick of the clock echoed like thunder, Every creak in the floorboards made my skin crawl. I sat there for hours staring at the half-eaten plate of beans, until the food turned cold and stiff. Sleep never came that night. My heart throbbed with rage and betrayal. I needed answers, real answers. No more half-truths, no more silence. When dawn broke, I found myself standing in Daniel's office. He always kept it locked, but I remembered the way his hand lingered under the rug before turning the key. I dropped to my knees and felt around the edges. My fingers brushed against cold metal. A spare key. The lock clicked open. The smell of stale paper and ink greeted me. His office was neat, almost too neat. Books lined perfectly on the shelves, files stacked in clean piles. But I knew Daniel. He was careful but not flawless. He always had a hiding place. I started with the desk drawers. Bills, receipts, letters from work. Nothing unusual. I almost gave up, but then my eyes landed on the bottom drawer. It had a false back just slightly misaligned. My hands trembled as I pried it open. Inside was a worn leather notebook. The cover was cracked, pages bulging from years of use. My breath caught as I opened it. Names. Dates. Amounts. Every page was filled with meticulous records. $200 for Ellen, $150 for Ray, $100 for Josephine. Some entries were underlined, others marked with a star. Next to each name were notes. Needs medicine. Sleeping under bridge. 2 kids hungry. I flipped page after page, my stomach twisting tighter with each entry. This wasn't random charity. This was a system. A network. Daniel had been funneling money, our money, into dozens of strangers' lives for years. At the back of the notebook I found something worse. Folded slips of paper, notes written in Daniel's messy scrawl. Clara must never know. They are my real family. She wouldn't understand. She never did. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the book. Real family? What did that mean? Who were these people to him? Tears blurred my vision. My marriage, my home, my life. It had all been a performance while he poured his heart into someone else's world. I kept digging. In the closet, inside an old shoebox, I found envelopes stuffed with cash. Thousands of dollars. More than I'd ever seen in one place. I thought of the nights I'd begged Daniel to fix the leaking roof, the times I'd stretched our grocery money thin, the evenings I'd sat sewing my old dress instead of buying a new one. All while he hoarded cash, only to hand it to strangers under the cover of night. The betrayal cut deeper than any affair. This wasn't about another woman. This was about a husband who had chosen an entire hidden life over his wife. I sank to the floor, clutching the notebook to my chest. My sobs filled the room. Memories came flooding back. Our early days of marriage, the laughter, the whispered promises under starlight. When had he stopped loving me? When had I become the outsider in my own home? As the sun climbed higher, I forced myself to stand. My tears dried into a hard, bitter resolve. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't sit back and watch my marriage rot from lies. That evening when Daniel returned, I was waiting in the living room. The notebook lay on the table in front of me. He froze the second he saw it. His face went pale. "Clara," he whispered, his voice shaky. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My voice came out steady, sharper than a blade. "How long?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Please." "How long?" I demanded, slamming my hand on the notebook. He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. I leaned closer, my voice trembling with fury. "All these years, Daniel. While I cooked, while I stayed loyal, while I believed in us, you were building a life without me. You called them your family." His lips parted, but no words came. "You lied to me every single day," I whispered. "You made me feel invisible in my own home." Daniel took a shaky breath, his eyes full of something I couldn't read. Shame, regret, or maybe just fear. But in that moment I didn't care what he felt. For the first time I saw my husband for what he truly was. A stranger. And as he stood there, speechless, I realized the man I thought I married no longer existed. The truth had buried him long ago. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the notebook flashed in front of me. The names. The money. The words, "They are my real family." I lay awake listening to Daniel's soft breathing beside me. It almost made me sick the way he could sleep so peacefully while my heart was being torn apart. I stared at the ceiling, my fists clenched under the blanket. By morning I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay silent anymore. When I walked into the kitchen, Daniel was already sipping his coffee. He didn't meet my eyes. I noticed the way his hands shook when he held the cup. Guilt. Fear. Whatever it wasn't enough. I poured my own coffee, sat down across from him and let the silence drag out. Finally I said, "I know more than you think." He froze. My voice was low, steady. "I know about the cash. The names. The lies. You've been living two lives, Daniel, and I've been the fool clapping for your performance." "Clara, please," he whispered. His eyes were glassy. "It's not what you think." I slammed my palm on the table. "Don't you dare say that to me again. I've read every page. Every word. You called them your family. What am I to you then? The cook? A housemaid?" He dropped his gaze, unable to answer. I leaned back in my chair, my breath heavy. "I don't want excuses. I want the truth. And if you can't give it to me, Daniel, I will find it myself." His eyes snapped up, wide with panic. "Clara, you can't." "Oh, I can." I cut him off, standing up. "You've hidden enough from me. It's time the world sees who you really are." I walked away, leaving him pale and trembling in his chair. For the first time in years I felt a spark of power inside me. The next few days I played my role carefully. I still cooked. I still cleaned. I still spoke to Daniel in the same quiet tone I always had. To anyone looking from the outside, we were the same couple. But inside me something had shifted. I began paying closer attention to his comings and goings. What time he left, what time he came home, how heavy his steps were at night. I noticed how often he carried bags, sometimes full, sometimes empty. I kept the notebook hidden under my pillow. Each night I studied it like scripture. Names and dates danced before my eyes until I memorized them. Ellen. Ray. Josephine. Who were they? Where did they live? And why had my husband chosen them over me? I decided to follow him. One evening after dinner, Daniel grabbed his coat and muttered something about a meeting. I waited a few minutes before slipping on my own shoes. The cold air stung my cheeks as I trailed behind him at a safe distance. He walked fast, his head low, clutching a worn duffel bag. My heart pounded with every step. We passed the grocery store, the church, the bus stop. Finally, he turned down an alley and knocked on a rusty door. It opened and I saw a woman's face peek out. Thin, tired, with hollow cheeks. She smiled at Daniel as though he were salvation itself. He handed her the bag. She hugged him. I froze in the shadows, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't romantic, but it was intimate, deeper than any touch he had given me in years. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm up to him and demand answers. But instead I bit my lip until it bled. I stayed hidden, watching, memorizing every detail. When he finally left, I followed him home. My body trembled, not from the cold but from rage. That night, while he slept, I sat at the table with the notebook open before me. I thought about the woman in the alley. Ellen, maybe. Or Josephine. Whoever she was, she had seen a side of Daniel I hadn't in decades. I whispered to myself, "He thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'll stay quiet. But he has no idea what silence can do." A plan began to take shape in my mind. I would not confront him with anger. I would not beg for the truth anymore. Instead, I would gather it, piece by piece, name by name, witness by witness. When the time was right, I would put it all on the table, not just for me but for everyone to see. Daniel had buried me in silence for years. Now I would use silence to bury him. I kept my plan close to my chest, hidden even in the quietest corners of my mind. Daniel must not suspect a thing. For days I moved like a shadow, memorizing his routines, studying the notebook until the names burned into my memory. The first name I chose was Ellen. She was mentioned the most, always with the highest amounts. Medicine. Rent. 2 children. One afternoon when Daniel was at work, I took the bus across town. The neighborhood was run down, with cracked sidewalks and peeling paint on the houses. Children played barefoot in the street, their laughter sharp against the dull gray sky. I found the address. A tiny, sagging house with a broken fence. My heart pounded as I walked up the steps and knocked on the door. It opened slowly, revealing a thin woman with tired eyes. She looked older than me, but her frame was frail, her shoulders slumped as if carrying invisible weights. "Yes," she asked cautiously. "Are you Ellen?" My voice shook, though I tried to sound steady. He hesitated, then nodded. "And you are?" I swallowed hard. "My name is Clara. I think you know my husband." Her eyes widened and her hand tightened on the doorknob. For a moment I thought she would slam the door shut. Instead she whispered, "You should come inside." The house was dim, the air heavy with the smell of boiled cabbage. In the corner, two small children played quietly with battered toys. Their clothes were worn, but their smiles were bright. Ellen motioned for me to sit at the rickety table. She poured me a cup of tea, her hands trembling. "You're Daniel's wife," she said softly. It wasn't a question. I nodded, my throat tightening. "How long has he been helping you?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Since my husband died. 6 years ago. I couldn't pay rent, couldn't buy medicine for my youngest. Daniel showed up one evening with groceries. I thought he was just being kind, but he kept coming back. He saved us." Her voice broke. She wiped her eyes quickly, ashamed of her tears. I sat frozen, my hands wrapped around the warm teacup. 6 years. 6 years of lies, of secrecy, of a double life. Did he ever? I hesitated, afraid of the answer. Did he ever say anything about me? Ellen shook her head slowly. "Only that you wouldn't understand. That you had your own life and this was his choice. He never spoke badly of you, Clara. He just kept this separate." My stomach churned. He hadn't poisoned her against me, but he had erased me as if I didn't exist in his world of mercy and secrets. The children giggled, drawing my eyes. One of them waved at me shyly, and for a fleeting moment, I felt the smallest crack in my anger. They were innocent. They didn't ask for this. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Thank you for your time, Ellen." She looked like she wanted to say more, but I turned and left before my tears betrayed me. I spent the next week tracking down more names from the notebook. Ray lived under a bridge near the highway, wrapped in layers of torn blankets. When I mentioned Daniel's name, his weathered face lit up. "That man is an angel," he rasped. "Kept me alive when winter wanted to kill me." Josephine, a woman in her 50s, lived in a tiny apartment above a laundromat. She clutched Daniel's envelopes of money like lifelines, calling him her blessing. Each encounter was the same. Gratitude. Love. Reverence. To them, Daniel wasn't my husband. He was a savior. And to me, he was a liar. Late one night, I returned home, exhausted from the weight of secrets. Daniel was sitting in the living room, waiting. His eyes narrowed the second he saw my face. "Where were you?" His tone was sharp, suspicious. I forced a small smile. "Just out for a walk." He studied me, his jaw tight. For a moment I thought he knew. But he said nothing. I excused myself and went upstairs. As soon as I shut the bedroom door, I let out a shaky breath. My heart raced like I'd run miles. But along with fear, there was something else inside me now. Clarity. I had seen the faces. I had heard their stories. I knew the truth Daniel had buried from me. And the truth was this. He wasn't just giving away money. He was building a legacy, one that excluded me completely. I looked at myself in the mirror, my reflection pale and tired. Quietly I whispered, "If he wants to live a double life, then I'll show him what betrayal really feels like." For years he had made me invisible. Now it was my turn to make him seen by everyone. The decision weighed on me for days, but once it settled inside me, it felt immovable, like stone. Daniel thought he could keep me silent, tucked away in the shadows while he lived a double life. But silence can be louder than screams, if you know when to break it. I began with small steps. I copied the most damning pages from the notebook, carefully writing them out in my own hand. Names, amounts, notes. I made a second copy and hid it in the attic. If Daniel ever tried to destroy the evidence, I would still have the truth. Next, I reached out to people who still trusted me. Neighbors, old friends, the pastor at church. I invited them to dinner. Just a casual gathering, I said, nothing fancy. On the night of the dinner, I cooked beans just as I always had. The smell filled the house, warm and familiar. But this time it wasn't love simmering in the pot. It was justice. Daniel came home looking tired, but when he saw the guests, his expression shifted. Surprise, then suspicion. "What's all this?" he asked. "Just dinner," I said smoothly, forcing a smile. "It's been too long since we had company." We all sat down, the table filled with small talk and laughter. Daniel tried to play the role of the charming husband, nodding politely, smiling when spoken to. But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted toward me as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. Halfway through the meal, I cleared my throat. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. "I want to share something with you all." The room quieted. Daniel's fork froze midair. I stood and placed the notebook on the table. Gasps rippled around as the worn leather cover snapped open. I flipped through the pages, my finger tracing the names, the amounts, the notes. "These," I said, "are the records my husband has been keeping for years. Thousands of dollars handed out in secret. Families supported, rent paid, medicine bought, all while he told me nothing." Daniel shot to his feet. "Clara, stop this madness." I ignored him. He called them his real family. He hid money while we struggled to keep our own home standing. He lied to me, to all of you. Every night while I thought he was working late, he was feeding this secret life. Murmurs filled the room. Curiosity. Disbelief. Daniel's face turned red. "I did it to help people. To give them what they needed. You wouldn't understand." I looked him straight in the eye, my voice sharp as glass. "You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand why you vowed to share your life with me, then gave your soul to strangers. I don't understand why you let me sew torn dresses while you stuffed cash into envelopes. I don't understand how a husband erases his wife from his world." The pastor shifted uncomfortably. "Daniel, is this true?" Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. His silence was answer enough. Ellen's face flashed in my mind, the children clutching their toys, Josephine clutching her envelope. I felt the ache of their gratitude, the sincerity of their love for him. And yet the bitterness inside me only deepened. I slammed the notebook shut. This isn't kindness. This is betrayal. He didn't just give money, he gave away his trust, his honesty, his marriage. And that is something no amount of charity can buy back. For the first time, Daniel looked small. His shoulders sagged, his eyes wet. But I felt no pity. I sat down slowly, my breath heavy. He thought I was weak. He thought I'd stay silent. But now they all know. Everyone will know. The room buzzed with whispers, some defending him, some condemning him. Daniel stood there, a man stripped bare, his secrets no longer his own. When the guests finally left, silence filled the house once more. Daniel remained at the table, his head in his hands. I walked past him, my steps slow but firm. At the doorway, I paused and said softly, "This is only the beginning." And for the first time in years, I felt something I had forgotten existed inside me. Power. The days after the dinner felt different. The silence in the house no longer belonged to me. It belonged to Daniel. He moved like a ghost, his steps heavy, his shoulders bent. The notebook, once his shield of secrets, had become a weapon against him. Words spread faster than I imagined. Neighbors whispered when he walked by. The pastor avoided his gaze during Sunday service. Even the cashier at the grocery store looked at him differently. People knew. I watched him unravel. He stopped smiling. He stopped sleeping. He barely ate. At night, I heard him pacing in the living room, muttering under his breath. Sometimes I caught words like mistake, family, and forgive. But he never said them to me. Not once. One evening, I found him sitting on the porch, staring into the dark. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette, a habit he'd abandoned years ago. "Clara," he said softly, not looking at me. "I was only trying to do good." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You don't destroy one life to save another." His eyes glistened. "They needed me. You don't know what it's like to watch people starve, to see children sick with no medicine. I couldn't turn away." My voice hardened. "And you think I would have turned away? You think I would have stopped you from helping? Oh, Daniel. You didn't keep this secret for them. You kept it for yourself. You wanted to be their savior. And to do that you erased me. He winced as if my words were knives. But I felt no mercy. The next morning I made my final move. I packed the notebook and my copies into a bag. I walked straight to the community hall where the church held its gatherings. People were already seated. Neighbors, families, even some of the very people whose names were in the book. When I stood before them, my hands trembled, but my voice did not. "This is the truth of my husband," I said, lifting the notebook. "For years he gave and gave. He saved lives, yes. But he did it in lies, in secrecy, while leaving me to carry a marriage built on shadows." Gasps filled the hall. Ellen stood from her seat, clutching her child's hand. He saved us," she whispered. "And I don't deny that," I replied, my eyes meeting hers. "But tell me, did you ever know he had a wife at home? A woman cooking beans night after night, wondering where her husband was? Did you know he called you his real family while making me feel like nothing?" Her lips trembled, but she had no answer. I turned to the crowd. Kindness built on betrayal is not kindness. It is pride. It is selfishness dressed in holy robes. Whispers swirled through the room. Some defended him, saying he was noble. Others shook their heads, seeing the deceit. Daniel arrived halfway through, his face pale, his eyes hollow. He stumbled forward, his voice cracking. "Clara, please stop this." "No," I cut him off, my voice ringing clear. "You stopped me for years. You silenced me. But not anymore. They deserve to know who you are. And I deserve to be heard." For a long moment the hall was silent. Then the murmurs grew into something heavier, a collective judgment. Daniel's shoulders sagged. He looked around at the faces, grateful once, now full of doubt. He looked at me last. His lips parted, but no words came. He turned and walked out. That was the last time Daniel ever stood tall. In the weeks that followed, his world collapsed. His job let him go, citing loss of trust. The neighbors who once praised him now avoided him. Even those he helped began to distance themselves, ashamed to be tied to the scandal. At home he barely spoke. He shrank into himself, a man swallowed by his own secrets. Sometimes I caught him staring at me with eyes full of something I couldn't name. Regret, sorrow, maybe even love. But it didn't matter anymore. One night, as I tucked the notebook back into its box, I whispered to myself, "This is what silence can do. It can shatter, it can expose, it can end." I no longer needed revenge. Karma had done its work. Daniel had wanted to be a savior, but in the end he saved no one. Not even himself. The house was quieter than ever. But this time the silence did not scare me. Felt like a friend, like something I had earned. Daniel moved through the rooms like a shadow, barely there. He no longer raised his voice. He no longer tried to explain. He simply existed. And I watched him with a strange detachment, as if he were already gone. One evening I made beans again. The same way I had for decades. The pan sizzled, the smell filled the kitchen, and for a moment I was pulled back into the woman I used to be. The wife waiting for her husband to come home, blind to the truth. But this time it was different. I sat at the table with my bowl of beans and whispered, "This meal is for me. Not for him. Not for anyone else. Just me." Daniel entered quietly, his hair messy, his eyes hollow. He sat across from me but didn't touch his food. "Clara," he said softly, "I've lost everything." I looked at him. "No, Daniel. You lost nothing. You gave it all away. And you never realized you were giving me away too." His eyes watered, but he didn't argue. For the first time in our marriage he had no more words, no more excuses. Just silence. The community kept their distance. Some whispered apologies to me at the market. Others avoided me, ashamed they had been part of his secret world. Ellen never came near again. But I didn't need their pity. Instead I began to write. I took out an old notebook of my own, its pages blank, its cover worn. I wrote about the dinners, about the silence, about the betrayal. I wrote about the night I opened that notebook and discovered a husband I had never truly known. And as I wrote, I realized something. This story was not about Daniel. It was about me. It was about the woman who waited too long to speak, the woman who carried her silence like a curse, the woman who finally broke free. One Sunday I returned to church alone. People turned to look at me, some with sympathy, some with shame. I ignored them. I sat in the front row and sang louder than I ever had before. My voice shook at first, but then it grew steady. Strong. For once, I wasn't singing to cover the silence. I was singing to celebrate it. Weeks turned into months. Daniel shrank more and more until one morning he didn't come down for breakfast. I found him sitting on the edge of the bed, his face pale, his eyes far away. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. I stood in the doorway. For years I would have rushed to comfort him, to tell him he was still my husband, still the man I loved. But not anymore. "You're the man you chose to be," I said. "And I'm the woman who finally chose herself." I turned and walked away, leaving him in his silence. Now, years later, as I sit on this porch with gray hair and wrinkled hands, I look back and see it all clearly. I see the beans cooking. I see the notebook. I see the night I stood in front of the community and spoke the truth. And I smile. Because I am not the woman who was erased. I am the woman who remembered herself. Daniel still lives here, somewhere in the shell of a man he became. But he is no longer my story. He is just a chapter, a warning, a ghost. My story is survival. My story is voice. My story is silence turned into strength. So when my granddaughter asked me last week, "Grandma, why do you always write in your notebook?" I smiled and said, "Because silence has teeth. And writing is how I tame it." She didn't fully understand. She just hugged me and ran off. But someday she will. Someday she will know that her grandmother cooked beans every night for a man who wasn't really hers. And that when the truth came out, that same grandmother stood tall and chose herself. This is my last supper of silence. And from now on, every meal, every word, every song is mine.